Paris has seen revolutions, innovations, and countless reinventions. But some of the most radical changes to the City of Lights never got past the drawing board. In the 1930s, architects and engineers were heavily influenced by modernism, futurism, and Art Deco. World War I was over, and they decided it was time to start building the skylines of the future. In Paris, the great minds of the era began proposing sweeping upgrades and adjustments. An airport floating above the Seine River, a 700-meter lighthouse that you could actually drive vehicles up, a ramp that would allow you to visit the Eiffel Tower by car. These weren't jokes or sketches hidden in notebooks, but real proposals that very nearly came to be. The only other thing they have in common is that today, virtually everyone agrees they would have ruined the city entirely. Airports are an essential feature of any large city hoping to capitalize on business and tourism. But because they are loud, dangerous, high-traffic areas, they are typically placed miles away from the city center. André Laursat thought otherwise. He proposed putting an airport in the very center of Paris, directly above the Seine River, right next to the Eiffel Tower. This might sound risky, and it certainly was, but the architect believed that the cities of the day were simply putting their airfields too far away. For instance, the way Paris was currently set up, travelers were losing up to an hour just getting from the airfield to the city. This might sound perfectly reasonable at first, until you realize how he wanted to construct the airport. Since the 16th and 15th arrondissements are famously quite crowded with monuments, museums, and classical buildings, Laursat proposed a massive concrete platform built 20 meters above the river. This would create a traditional runway for small planes while allowing boats to travel underneath. The huge structure would be supported by multiple towers, which would contain elevators to transport passengers and their luggage to and from street level. There would also be a hangar directly underneath the landing area, potentially with restaurants, waiting areas, and other airport must-haves. To be fair, landing right next to the Eiffel Tower would have been pretty cool, but the practical reality of having a giant runway in the heart of the city was far from ideal. And that's not even to mention the noise, pollution, and increased potential for accidents. Luckily, the people of Paris were far too attached to their skyline to see this idea through to fruition. Still, this was not the only strange architectural idea to nearly become a reality. Around the same time, another idea was emerging. This one was not only bigger, bolder, and even more ambitious, but it lacked the practical function of Laursat's airport. Known as the Lighthouse of the world, this was the brainchild of Eugène Freycinet. It was a monumental structure, and had it been built, it would have taken over the Eiffel Tower as the dominant feature of the Paris skyline. It wasn't just tall, it was enormous. Over 700 meters high, its peak would feature a massive rotating light that would have been visible for miles. In Freycinet's view, it would serve as a literal beacon announcing Paris to the world. But this wasn't just some static statue. After all, what good is a lighthouse unless you can travel to the top? So Freycinet designed his Fer du Monde with a spiraling road on the outside of the shaft. This would allow visitors to drive their way to the peak of the structure, where they would find a restaurant, a parking lot for more than 500 cars, and no shortage of incredible views of the surrounding city. Putting aside the traffic nightmare that would result if anything went wrong on the non-stop hairpin turns that climbed over a mile into the sky, the lighthouse was met with widespread derision. Even the most forward-thinking Parisians were reluctant to see their beloved Eiffel Tower reduced to a has-been. Meanwhile, other architects doubted whether the massive tower/highway could even be built with current technology. Eventually, it was deemed too complex, too expensive, and too excessive, even for Paris. Disconnected from the city it was supposed to represent, the Lighthouse of the world faded into obscurity. But it marked an important shift in pre-World War II culture, the moment when ambition officially started to drift away from practicality. This brings us to the final ill-conceived structure on our list. By 1936, Europe and North America had gone all in on the automobile. Popular science magazines of the time were wondering whether people would even be walking at all by the year 1940. So architects and city planners began designing for just such an eventuality. One of them was André Baudouin. His proposal was simple, but only when removed from the actual creation of his vision. Transform the Eiffel Tower into a drive-thru structure so that people could visit the world-famous monument without having to leave their precious cars. concept illustrations from Baudivand show two massive ramps spiraling upward on either side of the tower. Upon reaching a raised platform, the cars would level out and drive around the midpoint of the structure before driving down the adjacent ramp. It seems quite silly in retrospect, but in 1930s Paris, this was no joke. If you were going to build a city for cars, it would only make sense to build the monuments for the cars too. Had Baudivand gotten his way, this would have been the first of several tall structures around Europe to get the drive-thru treatment. Once completed, there's no telling how far the fad might have spread. Americans driving through the head of Abraham Lincoln at Mount Rushmore, a spiral ramp around the waist of Christ the Redeemer in Brazil. Given this possibility, it seems the famously finicky French may have saved the world from countless architectural abominations. Most Parisians were furious at the idea of treating the Eiffel Tower, a symbol of the highest importance, like any other infrastructure. Ironically, while the 1930s saw Paris city planners bending over backward to integrate the automobile into every facet of daily life, today the mayor of Paris is leading a fight against the car in an attempt to reclaim the streets for pedestrians and cyclists. It's easy to look back at these ideas and dismiss them as unrealistic, over the top, or absurd. But at the time, they weren't fringe concepts. In fact, they were part of a broader movement that, had it taken hold more assertively, could have drastically changed the world we live in today. The modernists believed that cities should, above all, be efficient, optimized, and future-oriented. This had the side effect of turning architects and engineers into visionary artists, and the great cities of the world into their canvases. Though most efforts that made it through to construction, such as Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, Missouri, fell short of their original utopian vision, places like Singapore and Dubai still carry that same spirit of futurism forward to this day.